A kind-hearted officer named John notices a little boy, Marcus, sitting in front of an abandoned house every afternoon. John offers him kindness without expecting anything in return, but he soon realizes there's much more to Marcus's story than meets the eye. As John uncovers the truth behind Marcus's quiet vigil, their connection deepens, and John's life is forever changed in ways he never anticipated. What was it about Marcus's situation that moved John to tears? And how did their journey bring healing to both of them in a way they couldn't have predicted? Let's find out. But before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this emotional story of compassion and healing, don't forget to subscribe. In the heart of Millbrook, a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone else, there stood a house that time had forgotten. Nestled at the end of Maple Street, it was a stark contrast to the well-maintained homes that lined the rest of the neighborhood. The once proud two-story structure now slouched beneath the weight of neglect, its paint peeling away like old scabs, revealing the weathered wood beneath. The windows, those eyes of the house that should have twinkled with life and laughter, were now blind, boarded up with planks of wood that had long since grayed with age. The front porch, which might have once welcomed visitors with open arms, now sagged precariously, as if one more footstep might send it crashing to the overgrown lawn below. That lawn, once neatly trimmed and cared for, had become a wild tangle of weeds and tall grass. Dandelions and thistles fought for dominance, their seeds carried on the wind to torment the meticulously manicured gardens of neighbors who glared at the eyesore with a mixture of pity and disdain. A rusted mailbox hung askew from its post, its flag forever at half-mast, as if mourning the life that had once filled the house. The driveway, cracked and buckled, was home to nothing but fallen leaves and the occasional brave dandelion that pushed its way through the fractures in the concrete. It was a house with secrets, with stories etched into its very foundation. The older residents of Millbrook would sometimes whisper about its past, tales of joy and sorrow, of beginnings and endings, but those stories had faded like the house itself, becoming little more than neighborhood legend. And yet, despite its dilapidated state, or perhaps because of it, the house had a visitor. Every afternoon, as regular as clockwork, a small figure would appear at the edge of the overgrown lawn. A young boy, no more than 8 years old, with skin the color of rich mahogany and eyes that seemed too old for his young face. His name was Marcus, though few in the neighborhood knew it. To most, he was simply that boy, the one who sat on the curb across from the abandoned house, day after day, rain or shine. He would arrive just as the school bus dropped off the other children, his backpack still slung over his shoulders, and take up his post. At first, the neighbors had been curious. Mrs. Jenkins, the retired schoolteacher who lived 2 doors down, had even approached him once. "Are you lost, dear?" she'd asked, her voice syrupy with concern. Marcus had simply shaken his head, his eyes never leaving the boarded-up windows of the house. Mrs. Jenkins had retreated, unsure what to make of the quiet child. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Marcus became as much a fixture of the street as the abandoned house itself. The neighbors grew accustomed to his presence, barely sparing him a glance as they went about their daily routines. But if they had looked closer, they might have noticed the way Marcus's small hands clutched at something hidden in the pocket of his worn jeans. They might have seen the slight trembling of his lower lip as he stared unblinkingly at the house. And if they had really paid attention, they might have caught the whispered words that sometimes escaped his lips, carried away on the breeze before anyone could hear them. "I'm here," he would murmur. "I'm still waiting." As summer faded into autumn, Marcus's vigil continued. The other children on the street would ride by on their bicycles, laughing and calling out to each other, but Marcus remained apart. Sometimes a curious child would slow down, peering at the solitary figure on the curb. "Hey, you want to play?" a freckle-faced boy once called out, balancing precariously on his bike. Marcus had turned then, his dark eyes meeting the other boys for a brief moment before shaking his head silently and turning back to the house. The freckle-faced boy had shrugged, pedaling away to rejoin his friends, the strange, quiet boy already forgotten. But Marcus couldn't forget. He couldn't join in their games or share in their laughter. He had a job to do, a promise to keep. And so he sat, day after day, his small form a stark contrast to the looming presence of the abandoned house. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across Maple Street, Marcus would finally stir. With a deep sigh that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond his years, he would stand, brushing off his worn jeans. His hand would dip into his pocket, pulling out a crumpled photograph for one last look before carefully tucking it away again. The photo, faded and worn around the edges, showed a smiling family, a man with kind eyes, a woman with Marcus's same warm skin tone, and a younger version of Marcus himself, grinning widely at the camera. The house in the background was the same one Marcus stared at every day, but in the photo, it was vibrant and welcoming, nothing like the decrepit structure that now stood before him. As Marcus turned to leave, his eyes would linger on the house one last time. A mixture of hope and heartbreak etched across his young face. Then, with slumped shoulders, he would begin the lonely walk home, disappearing around the corner as the streetlights flickered to life. The neighbors who happened to glance out their windows at that moment might have felt a twinge of something: curiosity, concern, or perhaps a vague sense of unease. But as dinner was served and families gathered around their tables, the image of the solitary boy faded from their minds, replaced by the comfortable routines of their own lives. As night fell on Maple Street, the abandoned house stood silent and dark, keeping its secrets close. But tomorrow would bring another day, and with it, the return of the boy who waited, his presence a constant reminder of a story yet untold. In the quiet of the evening, a gentle breeze rustled through the overgrown grass, carrying with it the whispered echoes of laughter and love that had once filled the house. And somewhere in the darkness, a small boy clutched a photograph to his chest, holding on to hope with all the strength his young heart could muster. Officer Mike Donovan had been patrolling the streets of Millbrook for over 15 years. At 45, his salt and pepper hair and the laugh lines around his eyes spoke of a life well lived. Known throughout the neighborhood for his gentle demeanor and approachable nature, Mike was the kind of cop who preferred to solve problems with a kind word rather than a stern warning. It was on a crisp autumn afternoon when Mike first noticed the boy sitting in front of the abandoned house on Maple Street. Cruising by in his patrol car, he slowed down, his eyes drawn to the small figure perched on the curb. Something about the boy's solitary presence tugged at Mike's heart, but he continued on his route, figuring it was just a kid taking a break on his way home from school. The next day, Mike saw the boy again in the exact same spot. This time, he paid a little more attention. The boy sat perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the dilapidated house across the street. Mike frowned slightly, but drove on, his mind already turning to the next stop on his patrol. As the days passed, Mike found himself looking for the boy each time he drove down Maple Street. Without fail, the child was there, a constant presence in front of the abandoned house. At first, Mike tried to brush off his growing concern. Kids did strange things sometimes, and if the boy wasn't causing any trouble, was it really his business? But something about the situation nagged at him. The boy's unwavering routine, the way he sat so still, as if waiting for something that never came. It all struck Mike as deeply unusual. After a week of driving by and seeing the same scene, he decided it was time to investigate. On a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Mike pulled his patrol car to the curb a few houses down from where the boy sat. He stepped out, adjusting his uniform and taking a deep breath. Approaching children could be tricky, especially for a police officer. The last thing he wanted was to frighten the boy. As Mike drew closer, he could see the child more clearly. The boy was small for his age, which Mike guessed to be around 8 or 9. His clothes were clean, but worn, speaking of care taken with limited resources. What struck Mike most, however, were the boy's eyes, dark, serious, and filled with a sadness that seemed far too profound for someone so young. "Hey there, young man," Mike said softly, coming to a stop a few feet from the boy. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" The boy's eyes flickered to Mike for a moment before returning to the house. He gave a small shrug, which Mike took as permission to sit down on the curb beside him. "I'm Officer Donovan," Mike continued, keeping his voice gentle. "But you can call me Mike if you like. I've seen you sitting here a few times now. Is everything okay?" For a long moment, the boy said nothing. Just as Mike was beginning to think he wouldn't get an answer, a small voice broke the silence. "I'm waiting for someone." Mike nodded slowly, his eyes following the boy's gaze to the abandoned house. "I see. And who might that someone be?" The boy's hand moved then, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small, worn photograph. He held it carefully, almost reverently, but didn't offer to show it to Mike. "My parents," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mike felt his heart constrict. There was a story here, one that he suspected was filled with pain. "That's a long time to be waiting," he said carefully. "Do you come here every day?" The boy nodded, his eyes never leaving the house. "What's your name, son?" Mike asked gently. "Marcus," came the quiet reply. "Well, Marcus, it's nice to meet you," Mike said, offering a warm smile that the boy didn't see. "You know, it's getting a bit chilly out here. How about I bring you something warm to drink tomorrow? Would that be okay?" For the first time, Marcus turned to look directly at Mike. His eyes were wary, but there was a flicker of something else there too, perhaps a hint of hope or gratitude. He nodded once, then turned back to his vigil. Mike stood up slowly, brushing off his uniform. "All right then, Marcus. I'll see you tomorrow. You take care now, okay?" As Mike walked back to his patrol car, his mind was racing. There was clearly more to Marcus's story than met the eye, and he was determined to unravel the mystery, not just as a police officer, but as someone who couldn't bear to see a child in pain. True to his word, Mike returned the next day with 2 steaming cups of hot chocolate. He found Marcus in his usual spot, looking small and vulnerable against the backdrop of the looming, abandoned house. "Here you go, Marcus," Mike said, holding out one of the cups. "Careful now, it's hot." Marcus accepted the cup with both hands, his fingers wrapping around the warmth. "Thank you," he murmured, taking a small sip. Mike settled down on the curb beside him, cradling his own cup. They sat in companionable silence, sipping their hot chocolate and watching the abandoned house as if it might suddenly spring to life. Over the next few weeks, Mike made it a point to stop by and see Marcus every day during his patrol. Sometimes he brought hot chocolate, other times a sandwich or a pack of cookies. Marcus never asked for anything, but he always accepted Mike's offerings with quiet gratitude. Slowly, bit by bit, Mike began to piece together Marcus's story. The boy didn't say much, but each small revelation painted a picture of loss and longing that broke Mike's heart. One day, as they sat sharing a bag of chips, Marcus suddenly spoke up. "My mom used to make the best cookies," he said, his voice wistful. "Chocolate chip with walnuts. The whole house would smell like them." Mike nodded encouragingly, not wanting to interrupt this rare moment of openness. "Dad would always try to sneak one before they were cool," Marcus continued, a ghost of a smile flickering across his face. "Mom would pretend to be mad, but she'd always wink at me when he wasn't looking." The smile faded as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a look of such profound sadness that Mike had to resist the urge to pull the boy into a hug. "I miss them," Marcus whispered, his small hands clutching the worn photograph he always carried. "I'm sure you do, buddy," Mike said softly. "It's okay to miss them. Can you tell me what happened?" Marcus shook his head, withdrawing into himself once more. Mike didn't push, knowing that trust took time to build, especially with a child who had clearly been through so much. As the days turned colder, Mike's concern for Marcus grew. He started bringing an extra jacket with him, draping it over the boy's shoulders when the wind picked up. He noticed that Marcus was always wearing the same clothes, clean but increasingly threadbare as the weeks went by. One particularly chilly afternoon, as Mike sat down beside Marcus with their now customary hot chocolates, he decided to broach a subject he'd been avoiding. "Marcus," he said gently, "I'm wondering about where you go when you're not here. Do you have someone taking care of you?" Marcus stiffened slightly, but didn't run away or shut down completely, which Mike took as a good sign. "My aunt," the boy said after a long pause. "She works a lot." Mike nodded, processing this new information. "And does your aunt know you come here every day?" Marcus shrugged, his eyes fixed on the abandoned house. The implications of that simple statement hit Mike like a punch to the gut. "Marcus," Mike said carefully, "I want you to know that if you ever need help, any kind of help, you can always come to me. Day or night, okay? I'm here for you, buddy." For the first time since they'd met, Marcus turned to look directly at Mike. His dark eyes were shining with unshed tears, and for a moment, Mike saw past the quiet, stoic exterior to the scared, hurting child beneath. "Why?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mike felt his own eyes growing misty. "Because everyone needs someone in their corner, Marcus. And I'd like to be in yours, if you'll let me." Marcus didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. The way he leaned ever so slightly towards Mike, accepting the comfort of his presence, spoke volumes. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Maple Street, Mike knew he had to head back to the station. But as he stood to leave, he felt a small hand grasp his own. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Marcus asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. Mike squeezed the boy's hand gently. "I'll be here, Marcus. I promise." Walking back to his patrol car, Mike's mind was racing. There was clearly more to Marcus's story than he yet knew, and he was determined to get to the bottom of it. But more than that, he was committed to being there for this boy who had somehow worked his way into Mike's heart. As he drove away, Mike glanced in his rearview mirror. Marcus was still there, a small, solitary figure against the backdrop of the abandoned house. But for the first time, the boy raised his hand in a small wave goodbye. It wasn't much, but to Mike, it felt like the first ray of sunlight breaking through a long, dark night. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain. He would do everything in his power to help Marcus find his way back to the light. As the days grew shorter and the air crisper, Officer Mike Donovan found himself increasingly preoccupied with thoughts of Marcus and the abandoned house on Maple Street. The boy's daily vigil and the mystery surrounding it had taken root in Mike's mind, refusing to let go. He knew he needed to dig deeper to understand the full story behind Marcus's quiet grief. One chilly morning, Mike decided to start his investigation in earnest. He began by approaching Mrs. Jenkins, the retired schoolteacher who lived 2 doors down from the abandoned house. As he knocked on her door, he could hear the faint tinkling of wind chimes and the bark of a small dog. Mrs. Jenkins answered, her silver hair neatly coiffed and a cardigan wrapped tightly around her slender frame. "Officer Donovan," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Is everything all right?" Mike smiled reassuringly. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Jenkins. I was hoping I could ask you a few questions about the abandoned house down the street and the boy who sits in front of it." Mrs. Jenkins's face softened with understanding. "Oh, that poor child. Come in. I'll put on some tea." As they settled into Mrs. Jenkins's floral-patterned living room, the elderly woman began to speak, her voice tinged with sadness. "That house," she said, shaking her head slowly, "it used to be so full of life. The Williams family lived there, lovely people they were, John and Ava, with their little boy, Marcus." Mike leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Can you tell me more about them?" Mrs. Jenkins nodded, her eyes distant with memory. "John was a high school teacher, just like I used to be. Ava worked from home, doing something with computers. They were always so kind, always willing to lend a hand to anyone in need. And little Marcus, oh, he was the light of their lives. Such a happy child, always laughing and playing in the front yard." "What happened to them?" Mike asked gently, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer. Mrs. Jenkins's eyes filled with tears. "It was about 3 years ago now. There was a terrible accident on the highway. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel, they said. John and Ava, they didn't stand a chance." Mike felt a lump form in his throat. "And Marcus? He wasn't with them, thank goodness," Mrs. Jenkins replied, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "He was staying with his aunt for the weekend. It was supposed to be a quick overnight trip for John and Ava, just to attend a friend's wedding. They never made it there." The pieces were starting to fall into place, and Mike felt a wave of sadness wash over him. "So that's why Marcus sits in front of the house every day," he said softly. Mrs. Jenkins nodded. "I think, in his young mind, he's still waiting for them to come home. It breaks my heart to see him there, day after day. I've tried talking to him a few times, but he's so withdrawn now. Nothing like the bubbly little boy he used to be." As Mike left Mrs. Jenkins's house, his mind was reeling from the information he'd gathered. He spent the rest of the day talking to other neighbors, each conversation adding another layer to the tragic story of the Williams family. Mr. Grayson, the elderly man who lived across the street, recalled how John Williams had always made time to help him with yard work. "That man had a heart of gold," he said gruffly, his eyes misting over. He used to bring Marcus with him sometimes. They'd make a game out of raking leaves or planting flowers. It was a joy to watch them together. The Patels, a young couple who had moved in just before the accident, shared how Ava Williams had been the first to welcome them to the neighborhood. "She brought us a homemade apple pie," Mrs. Patel remembered fondly. "Said it was a neighborhood tradition. We didn't have the heart to tell her we were vegetarian and couldn't eat it, but the gesture meant so much to us." With each story, the weight on Mike's heart grew heavier. The Williams family had been beloved members of the community, their loss leaving a void that was still keenly felt years later. And at the center of it all was Marcus, a little boy whose world had been shattered in an instant. As the sun began to set, Mike knew there was one more person he needed to talk to: Marcus's aunt. Through his conversations with the neighbors, he had learned that her name was Lisa Carter, and she lived in a small apartment complex. The following day, Mike made his way to Lisa's apartment. The building was old and in need of repair, with peeling paint and a rusty fire escape zigzagging up the side. He climbed the creaky stairs to the third floor and found apartment 3C at the end of a dimly lit hallway. Taking a deep breath, Mike knocked on the door. For a long moment, there was no response. Just as he was about to knock again, he heard the sound of locks being undone, and the door opened a crack. A tired-looking woman in her late 20s peered out at him. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were deep shadows under her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked warily. Mike introduced himself, explaining that he was there to talk about Marcus. At the mention of her nephew's name, Lisa's expression softened slightly, and she opened the door wider. "Come in," she said, her voice heavy with fatigue. "Sorry about the mess. I don't get much time for cleaning these days." The apartment was small and cluttered, but Mike could see signs of someone trying their best to make it a home. Crayon drawings were taped to the refrigerator, and a well-worn stuffed bear sat on the threadbare couch. Lisa gestured for Mike to sit, and then sank into an armchair across from him. "Is Marcus in trouble?" she asked, worry creasing her brow. Mike was quick to reassure her. "No, not at all. I've just noticed him sitting in front of the old house on Maple Street every day, and I wanted to check in, make sure everything's okay." Lisa's shoulders slumped, and she closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they were filled with a mixture of sadness and frustration. "That house," she said softly. "I wish I could make him understand that his parents aren't coming back, but it's like he's stuck in that moment, you know? The last time he saw them alive." Mike nodded encouragingly, and Lisa continued, the words spilling out as if she'd been holding them back for too long. "I try my best. I really do. But it's so hard. I work 2 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Most days I barely see Marcus. He's asleep when I leave for my morning shift, and I get home late from the evening one." "That must be incredibly difficult," Mike said gently. "How long has Marcus been living with you?" Lisa ran a hand through her hair, dislodging a few strands from her ponytail. "Since the accident, so about 3 years now. I was Ava's sister, am Ava's sister," she corrected herself, a flash of pain crossing her face. "When it happened, there was no question. Marcus needed me, and I couldn't let him go into the system." Mike felt a surge of admiration for this woman who had put her own life on hold to care for her orphan nephew. "That's very admirable of you," he said sincerely. Lisa gave a bitter laugh. "Admirable? I feel like I'm failing him every day. He needs so much more than I can give him. Therapy, for one thing, but who has the money for that? And time. He needs someone who can be there for him, really be present. But I'm stretched so thin just trying to keep us afloat." She stood up abruptly, walking to the window and staring out at the gray sky. "Do you know what the worst part is?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I resent him, and then I hate myself for feeling that way. He's just a little boy who lost everything, and here I am, wishing for my old life back." Mike felt his heart constrict at the raw honesty in Lisa's words. He stood up and moved to stand beside her, careful to give her space. "Lisa," he said gently, "what you're feeling is natural. You've taken on an enormous responsibility, and it's okay to struggle with it. The important thing is that you're here, doing your best for Marcus." Lisa turned to look at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But is it enough? He spends his days sitting in front of that empty house, waiting for people who are never coming back. I've tried to talk to him about it, try to get him to stop going there, but—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "Can you tell me more about why Marcus goes to the house?" Mike asked, sensing there was more to the story. Lisa sighed heavily, moving back to sit on the couch. She picked up the stuffed bear, absently smoothing its fur as she spoke. The day of the accident, John and Ava dropped Marcus off here. They were going to a wedding a few hours away, just an overnight trip. Marcus was excited about having a sleepover with me. She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. They promised him they'd be back the next day to pick him up. Said they'd all go out for ice cream when they got home. Marcus stood at the window, waving goodbye as they drove away. That was the last time he saw them. Mike felt a lump forming in his throat as he began to understand the depth of Marcus's trauma. So, when he sits in front of the house, he's waiting for them to come home, just like they promised, Lisa finished, her voice breaking. In his mind, if he's there every day, he won't miss them when they return. He's convinced that if he just waits long enough, they'll keep their promise and come back for him. The full weight of the situation hit Mike like a physical blow. This wasn't just a child grieving. This was a little boy trapped in a moment of time, unable to move forward because doing so would mean accepting that his parents were truly gone. "I've tried everything I can think of," Lisa continued, her words coming faster now. "I've explained death to him, showed him the accident report, even taken him to the cemetery. But it's like there's a part of him that just can't or won't understand. And I don't know how to help him." Mike sat down beside Lisa, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd learned. "Has Marcus had any counseling?" he asked gently. Lisa shook her head, a look of shame crossing her face. "I looked into it, but between the cost and trying to find time to take him to appointments, it just wasn't possible. I feel like I'm letting him down, but I don't know what else to do." As Lisa spoke, Mike could see the toll this situation had taken on her. She was a woman drowning, trying desperately to keep both herself and Marcus afloat in the face of overwhelming grief and responsibility. "Lisa," Mike said softly, "I want you to know that you're not alone in this. What you've done for Marcus, taking him in and providing for him, that's incredible. But it's okay to need help." Lisa looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her tired eyes. "What kind of help?" "I've already applied for every assistance program I could find, but there's always more month than money, you know?" Mike nodded understanding. "I'm not just talking about financial help, though that's certainly important. I'm talking about support for both you and Marcus. There are grief counseling groups, support networks for guardians in your situation. And I'd like to help if you'll let me." For a moment, Lisa looked like she might break down, but then she straightened her shoulders, a look of determination crossing her face. "I'd be grateful for any help you can offer," she said. "I just want what's best for Marcus. I want him to be able to move forward, to be a kid again, you know?" As their conversation continued, Mike learned more about the daily struggles Lisa faced. She worked as a waitress in the mornings and a convenience store clerk in the evenings, often picking up extra shifts on weekends just to make ends meet. Her own dreams of going back to school had been put on hold indefinitely. "Marcus is a good kid," Lisa said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "He never complains, even though I know this isn't the life he should have. He does his homework without being asked, keeps his room tidy. Sometimes I think he's trying to be perfect, like if he does everything right, his parents will come back." The thought broke Mike's heart. He could picture Marcus diligently doing his schoolwork and keeping his things in order, all the while holding on to the desperate hope that good behavior would somehow bring his parents back to him. As the conversation wound down, Mike stood to leave, his mind already formulating plans to help this struggling family. "Lisa," he said, "I want to thank you for being so open with me. I know it couldn't have been easy to share all of this." Lisa managed a small smile. "Actually, it feels good to talk about it. I've been carrying this alone for so long. It's nice to know someone else cares." Mike reached out and squeezed her shoulder gently. "A lot of people care, Lisa. We just need to figure out how to show that care in ways that really help you and Marcus. I promise you, I'm going to do everything I can to support you both." As Mike left the apartment complex and walked to his car, he felt a whirlwind of emotions. The tragedy that had befallen Marcus and the daily struggles faced by Lisa weighed heavily on his heart. But mixed with the sadness was a fierce determination to make a difference in their lives. Sitting in his patrol car, Mike took a moment to collect his thoughts. The image of Marcus, faithfully waiting in front of the abandoned house day after day, took on a new and heartbreaking significance. It wasn't just about missing his parents. It was about a child clinging to a promise, unable to move forward because doing so would mean accepting a reality too painful to bear. Mike thought about his own life, his own struggles. He'd gone through a divorce a few years back, and while it had been painful, it paled in comparison to what Marcus and Lisa were going through. Yet, he realized it had given him a perspective that might just help him connect with them on a deeper level. As he started the car, Mike made a silent promise to himself and to the memory of John and Ava Williams. He would do everything in his power to help their son find a way to honor their memory while also embracing life again. And he would make sure Lisa knew she wasn't alone in her efforts to provide Marcus with the love and support he so desperately needed. Officer Mike Donovan sat in his patrol car, parked a short distance from the abandoned house on Maple Street. His eyes were fixed on Marcus, the small figure perched on the curb, waiting as he did every day for parents who would never return. As Mike watched, he felt a familiar ache in his chest, one that had nothing to do with the boy's tragic story and everything to do with his own. Mike's mind drifted to his own son, Jake, now living across the state with his ex-wife, Sarah. It had been 3 months since the divorce was finalized, 3 months of awkward phone calls and stilted weekend visits. Mike's grip tightened on the steering wheel as he remembered the look in Jake's eyes the last time he dropped him off after a visit. A mixture of sadness, confusion, and something that looked unsettlingly like resignation. "You okay, Dad?" Jake had asked, his voice small and uncertain. Mike had forced a smile, ruffling his son's hair. "Of course, buddy. I'll see you in 2 weeks, okay?" But as he'd driven away, watching Jake's figure grow smaller in the rearview mirror, Mike had felt anything but okay. The divorce had been his idea, a decision made after years of growing apart from Sarah, of feeling like they were living separate lives under the same roof. He'd told himself it was for the best, that Jake would adjust, that they could still be a family, just a different kind of family. Now, looking at Marcus, Mike wondered if he'd made the right choice. The boy's unwavering vigil was a stark reminder of the power of family, of the devastating impact its loss could have. Mike found himself drawing parallels between Marcus's situation and his own son's. While Jake hadn't lost his parents to death, hadn't he lost something just as significant? The security of a united family, the comfort of having both parents under one roof. Mike's reflections were interrupted by the sight of Marcus standing up, brushing off his jeans, and starting his solitary walk home. Without really thinking about it, Mike got out of his car and jogged to catch up with the boy. "Hey, Marcus," he called softly. "Mind if I walk with you for a bit?" Marcus looked up, his dark eyes meeting Mike's. He shrugged, which Mike had come to recognize as the boy's way of saying yes. As they walked side by side, Mike found himself talking, filling the silence with words he hadn't planned. "You know, I have a son about your age. His name is Jake." Marcus didn't respond, but Mike noticed him glance up, a flicker of interest in his eyes. "Jake lives with his mom now," Mike continued. "Well, we're not together anymore. It's been tough, especially for Jake. I worry about him a lot." They walked in silence for a moment before Marcus spoke, his voice so soft Mike almost missed it. "Does he wait for you too?" The question hit Mike like a physical blow. He stopped walking, kneeling down to meet Marcus at eye level. "What do you mean, buddy?" Marcus's eyes were fixed on the ground, his small hands fidgeting with the hem of his worn jacket. "Does he sit and wait for you to come home? Like I do for my mom and dad?" Mike felt his throat constrict, tears pricking at the corners of his eyes. "No, Marcus," he said gently. "Jake knows where I am, even if I'm not there all the time. But you know what? I think maybe he feels a little lost sometimes, just like you do." Marcus looked up then, his eyes meeting Mike's. "I don't want to be lost anymore," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I want my mom and dad to find me." In that moment, looking into Marcus's eyes, Mike saw his own son. He saw Jake's confusion and pain, the silent plea for stability and reassurance. And he saw his own failings as a father, the times he'd been too caught up in his own emotions to truly see what his son needed. Without thinking, Mike pulled Marcus into a hug. The boy stiffened for a moment, then melted into the embrace, his small body shaking with silent sobs. Mike held him tightly, his own tears falling freely now. "I know, buddy," he murmured. "I know it hurts, but I promise you, you're not alone. We're going to figure this out together, okay?" As they stood there on the sidewalk, a police officer holding a grieving boy, Mike felt something shift inside him. The parallels between Marcus's situation and his own family's struggles became crystal clear. In helping Marcus, he realized he might just find a way to be a better father to Jake. After walking Marcus home, making sure he was safely inside with his aunt, Mike returned to his patrol car. He sat behind the wheel, his hands shaking slightly as the emotions of the day caught up with him. And then, for the first time since his divorce, since he'd watched Jake's face crumple as he explained that Daddy wouldn't be living at home anymore, Mike broke down. The tears came in great, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. He cried for Marcus, for the unfairness of a world that could take parents away from a child who needed them so desperately. He cried for Jake, for the pain and confusion his son must be feeling, pain that Mike had tried to downplay in his efforts to make everything seem okay. And he cried for himself, for the guilt and regret that had been building up inside him, threatening to overflow. As the sobs subsided, leaving him feeling drained but somehow lighter, Mike's mind began to clear. He thought about Marcus, about the daily vigil that was keeping the boy trapped in his grief. And he thought about Jake, about the distance that had grown between them, a distance that Mike had allowed to fester in his misguided attempts to make the divorce easier. In that moment, sitting in his patrol car with tear-stained cheeks and a heart full of resolve, Mike made a decision. He couldn't change the past, couldn't bring Marcus's parents back, or undo his divorce. But he could take action now. He could be the adult that both Marcus and Jake needed, a steady presence offering support, understanding, and guidance. Wiping his eyes, Mike started the car and headed towards the police station. His shift had ended hours ago, but he knew his superior, Captain Rodriguez, often worked late. As he drove, Mike's mind raced with ideas. He couldn't solve all of Marcus's problems or Jake's, but he could start making a difference today. Arriving at the station, Mike found Captain Rodriguez in his office, poring over paperwork. The captain looked up as Mike knocked on the open door, his eyebrows rising in surprise. "Donovan, I thought you'd gone home hours ago." Mike stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "Captain, I need to talk to you about something important. It's about a boy in our community who needs help." For the next hour, Mike poured out the whole story. Marcus's daily vigil, the tragic loss of his parents, the aunt struggling to make ends meet. He shared his own emotional connection to the case, opening up about his struggles with Jake and the parallels he saw between the two situations. Captain Rodriguez listened intently, his expression growing more concerned as Mike spoke. When Mike finally finished, the captain leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "This is a tough situation, Donovan," he said, "but I'm glad you brought it to my attention. What do you propose we do?" Mike leaned forward, his voice passionate. "I've been thinking about that, sir. First, we need to get Marcus some professional help. There's a child psychologist in town, Dr. Emily Chen. She specializes in grief counseling for kids. I'd like to see if we can arrange for Marcus to see her, maybe set up a fund to cover the costs." Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly. "That's a good start. What else?" "I've also been thinking about the house," Mike continued. "It's become a symbol for Marcus, a physical representation of his weight for his parents. But what if we could turn it into something positive? Maybe we could get the community involved, fix it up, turn it into a place of healing instead of a reminder of loss." The captain's eyebrows rose. "That's a big undertaking, Donovan. You're talking about a lot of time and resources." Mike nodded, undeterred. "I know, sir, but I really believe this could make a difference, not just for Marcus, but for the whole community. And," he hesitated for a moment before plunging ahead, "I'd like to take point on this. I know I've got a lot on my plate with Jake and the divorce, but I think this could be good for all of us." Captain Rodriguez studied Mike for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. All right, Donovan. I can see this means a lot to you. Draw up a proper proposal, budget, timeline, community involvement, the works. If it looks feasible, you've got my support. Mike felt a wave of relief wash over him. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. As he left the captain's office, Mike's mind was already racing with plans. He'd need to talk to Lisa, Marcus's aunt, get her on board. He'd need to reach out to Dr. Chun, see if she'd be willing to take on Marcus's case. And he'd need to rally the community, get them invested in helping one of their own. But before all that, there was one more call he needed to make. Pulling out his phone, Mike dialed a familiar number, his heart pounding as he waited for an answer. Hello? Jake's voice was sleepy, and Mike realized with a pang that it was past his son's bedtime. Hey, buddy, Mike said softly. I know it's late, but I just wanted to hear your voice. How are you doing? There was a pause, and Mike could almost see Jake's confused expression. I'm okay, Dad. Is everything all right? Mike took a deep breath. Everything's fine, Jake. I want you to know that I love you so much. And I know things have been tough lately, but I promise you we're going to figure it out together, okay? There was another pause, longer this time. When Jake spoke again, his voice was small but hopeful. Okay, Dad. I love you too. As Mike ended the call, he felt a sense of purpose settling over him. He couldn't change the past, couldn't undo the hurt that had already been done. But he could move forward, could work to heal the rifts in his own family, while also helping Marcus find his way back to life. Tomorrow, he decided he would start putting his plans into action. He'd talk to Lisa, reach out to Dr. Chun, and begin rallying the community. But for night, he had one more stop to make. Driving back to Maple Street, Mike parked his car and walked to the abandoned house. Standing in front of it, he could almost see Marcus sitting on the curb, his small figure a testament to both heartbreak and hope. I promise you, Mike said softly to the empty street, we're going to make this right. You're not alone anymore, Marcus. And neither am I. As he turned to leave, Mike caught a glimpse of movement in one of the neighboring houses. Mrs. Jenkins stood at her window, a gentle smile on her face as she gave him a small wave. Mike waved back, feeling a surge of determination. This wasn't just about Marcus anymore, or even about Jake. This was about community, about coming together to support one another through life's toughest moments. And as Mike walked back to his car, he felt for the first time in a long while that he was exactly where he needed to be. The next morning, Mike woke early, his mind already buzzing with plans. He made a quick call to the station, letting them know he'd be coming in late. Then, taking a deep breath, he dialed Sarah's number. Mike, his ex-wife's voice was surprised. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Mike assured her quickly. I actually wanted to talk to you about something important. Do you have a few minutes? There was a pause, and Mike could almost see Sarah's hesitation. But then she said, Sure, I've got some time before work. What's going on? For the next half hour, Mike poured out the whole story. Marcus, the abandoned house, his own emotional journey. He explained his plans to help and how it had made him realize some important things about his relationship with Jake. I know I haven't been the best dad lately, Mike said, his voice thick with emotion. I've been so caught up in my own feelings about the divorce that I haven't really been there for Jake the way he needs me to be. But I want to change that. I want to do better. There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment. When Sarah spoke, her voice was soft. I'm glad you're realizing this, Mike. Jake needs you. He misses you. I miss him too, Mike said. I was thinking, would it be okay if I came over this weekend? Maybe we could all have dinner together, like we used to. I know it won't fix everything, but I think that would be good, Sarah interrupted gently. For all of us. As Mike ended the call, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It was a small step, but an important one, and it gave him the boost he needed to tackle the next challenge, helping Marcus. Over the next few weeks, Mike threw himself into his plans with a fervor that surprised even him. He met with Dr. Chun, who agreed to take on Marcus's case pro bono after hearing the boy's story. He organized a community meeting, sharing Marcus's situation and his ideas for renovating the abandoned house. To his amazement and gratitude, the community rallied around the cause. Local businesses donated materials, volunteers signed up to help with the renovation, and a fund was set up to support Marcus and his aunt. Even Captain Rodriguez got involved, using his connections to fast-track the necessary permits. But the most significant change was in Marcus himself. With regular sessions with Dr. Chun and the unwavering support of Mike and the community, the boy slowly began to open up. He still visited the house every day, but now he would talk about his parents, sharing memories and working through his grief. One sunny Saturday, as Mike and Marcus sat on the curb in front of the house, now buzzing with activity as volunteers worked on the renovation, the boy turned to Mike with a serious expression. "Officer Mike," he said softly, "do you think my mom and dad would be mad at me if I stopped waiting for them here every day?" Mike felt his heart clench. Putting an arm around Marcus's shoulders, he said gently, "No, buddy, I don't think they'd be mad at all. I think they want you to be happy, to live your life. And you know what? They're always with you, right here." He tapped Marcus's chest, right over his heart. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes filling with tears. But for the first time, Mike saw something else there too, a glimmer of acceptance, of hope for the future. As they sat there, watching the transformation of the house that had been a symbol of loss for so long, Mike felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. He thought about Jake, about the progress they'd made in rebuilding their relationship. He thought about Sarah, and how they were learning to co-parent in a way that put Jake's needs first. And he thought about Marcus, this brave little boy who had taught him so much about resilience, about the power of community, and about the enduring strength of love. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over Maple Street, Mike stood up, holding out his hand to Marcus. "What do you say we go get some ice cream, buddy? I think we've both earned it." Marcus took his hand, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Can we invite Aunt Lisa too?" Mike grinned, his heart swelling with affection. "Of course we can. And you know what? I bet she'd love to hear some stories about your mom and dad. What do you think?" Marcus nodded, his smile growing wider. "I'd like that." As they walked down Maple Street, hand in hand, Mike knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be tough days, setbacks, moments of grief and doubt. But he also knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that they would face those challenges together. For in helping Marcus find his way back to life, Mike had found something too, a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a father, and a community that stood ready to support one another through life's darkest moments. And as Marcus's laughter rang out, bright and clear in the evening air, Mike knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, for Marcus, for himself, and for the entire community of Millbrook. A chapter filled with hope, healing, and the unbreakable bonds of love and friendship. The renovated house on Maple Street stood as a testament to the power of community and healing. What was once a symbol of loss and waiting had been transformed into a beacon of hope. The peeling paint had been replaced with a warm, inviting blue. The sagging porch now stood proud and welcoming, adorned with hanging baskets of colorful flowers. The overgrown lawn had been tamed, revealing a lush green carpet dotted with cheerful daisies. But the most significant change wasn't in the physical appearance of the house. It was in the spirit of the place, and in the hearts of those who had come together to make this transformation possible. Officer Mike Donovan stood on the sidewalk, taking in the sight with a sense of pride and wonder. It had been 6 months since that fateful day when he'd first noticed Marcus sitting in front of the abandoned house. 6 months of hard work, emotional breakthroughs, and a community coming together in ways he'd never imagined possible. As Mike watched, a small figure came bounding down the freshly painted steps of the house. Marcus, his face alight with a smile that still made Mike's heart soar every time he saw it. "Officer Mike," Marcus called out, running towards him. "Did you see? We finished painting my room yesterday. It's blue, just like Dad's old car." Mike grinned, ruffling the boy's hair as he reached him. "That's great, buddy. I bet it looks awesome." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "Aunt Lisa says we can start moving our stuff in next week. Can you believe it? We're going to live in my old house again." The decision to have Marcus and Lisa move into the renovated house had been a collective one. The community had rallied around the idea, seeing it as a way to help the struggling family, while also allowing Marcus to maintain a connection to his parents' memory. The house had been fully updated, with Lisa's apartment serving as a separate rental unit to provide additional income. "I can't wait to see it," Mike said, his voice warm with affection. "You know, I was thinking, how about we have a big housewarming party once you're all settled in? We could invite everyone who helped with the renovation, make it a real community celebration." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be so cool. Can we have ice cream?" Mike laughed. "Buddy, we can have all the ice cream you want. It's your party after all." As they chatted, Mike noticed Lisa coming down the path from the house. She looked different these days, still tired, the shadows under her eyes a testament to her ongoing struggles. But there was a lightness to her step that hadn't been there before. "Hi, Mike," she said, joining them on the sidewalk. "I see Marcus has already filled you in on our big moving plans." Mike nodded, smiling. "He sure has. How are you holding up with all the excitement?" Lisa took a deep breath, her eyes moving from Marcus to the house and back to Mike. "Honestly, it's overwhelming sometimes. I never thought we'd be here, you know? Living in John and Ava's house. It's like a dream and a nightmare all at once." Mike placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "I can only imagine. But remember, you're not alone in this. We're all here for you, whatever you need." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, managing a watery smile. "I know, and I'm so grateful for everything you've done, for what this whole community has done. I wish John and Ava could see this, could see how Marcus is doing, how he's healing." As if on cue, Marcus piped up, "Mom and Dad can see us, Aunt Lisa. Officer Mike says they're always with us, in our hearts." Lisa's breath caught, and she pulled Marcus into a tight hug. Mike watched, his own eyes misting over. It was moments like these that made all the hard work, all the emotional ups and downs worth it. The sound of a car pulling up broke the moment. Mike turned to see a familiar vehicle parking at the curb. His heart rate picked up as he watched Sarah step out of the driver's seat, followed closely by Jake. "Dad!" Jake called out, his face breaking into a wide grin as he ran towards Mike. Mike caught his son in a bear hug, lifting him off his feet. "Hey, buddy, this is a surprise." Sarah approached more slowly, a slightly nervous smile on her face. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by. Jake's been talking nonstop about the house renovation, and I thought it might be nice for him to see it in person." Mike felt a warmth spread through his chest. The past 6 months hadn't just been about helping Marcus and his community. They'd been about healing his own family, too. The regular dinners with Sarah and Jake had evolved into a new kind of relationship. Not the marriage they once had, but a friendship built on mutual respect and a shared love for their son. "Of course I don't mind," Mike said, setting Jake down. "In fact, your timing is perfect. Marcus was just telling me about the party we're planning for when they move in. I was hoping you both might want to come." Jake's eyes lit up. "A party? Cool. Can I help set up, Dad?" Mike laughed, ruffling Jake's hair. "You bet, kiddo. In fact, why don't you go ask Marcus what kind of decorations he wants? I'm sure he'd love your input." As Jake ran off to join Marcus and Lisa, Sarah moved closer to Mike. "This is really something special, Mike," she said softly, her eyes taking in the transformed house. "When you first told me about Marcus and your plans, I'll admit I was skeptical. But seeing this, seeing the change in you, I'm really proud of you." Mike felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot. And thank you for being so supportive, especially with Jake. I know it hasn't been easy." Sarah shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "It hasn't always been easy, no, but it's been worth it. Jake's happier than he's been in a long time. And so am I, if I'm being honest." Before Mike could respond, he was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Emily Chun, Marcus's therapist. She walked up the path, her face breaking into a warm smile as she took in the scene before her. "Well, this looks like quite the gathering," she said, joining the group. "Marcus, are you ready for our session?" Marcus nodded, his earlier excitement tempered by a more serious expression. "Yes, Dr. Chun. Can we have it in my new room today? I want to show you something." Dr. Chin's eyes met Mike's, a silent question passing between them. Mike gave a small nod, and Dr. Chin turned back to Marcus with a smile. "Of course we can. Lead the way." As Marcus led Dr. Chun into the house, Mike felt a mixture of emotions wash over him. Pride in how far Marcus had come, gratitude for the support of people like Dr. Chun, and a bittersweet ache for the parents who should have been here to see their son's progress. Lisa, seeming to sense his thoughts, placed a hand on his arm. "You know," she said softly, "there are days when I look at Marcus and I see so much of John and Ava in him. His laugh, the way he furrows his brow when he's concentrating. It's like they're still here, in a way." Mike nodded, understanding all too well. "They are," he said. "In him, in this house, in the memories we keep alive, and in the way this whole community has come together. John and Ava touched a lot of lives. Their legacy lives on in all of us." As they stood there, watching Jake excitedly tell Sarah about his ideas for the party decorations, Mike felt a sense of peace settle over him. This journey had been about so much more than renovating a house or helping one grieving boy. It had been about rediscovering the power of community, about healing old wounds and forging new connections. The weeks leading up to the housewarming party flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Mike found himself at the center of it all, coordinating volunteers, arranging for food and decorations, and making sure everything was perfect for Marcus and Lisa's big day. On the morning of the party, Mike arrived early to help with the final preparations. He found Marcus sitting on the front porch, his legs swinging as he watched the sun rise over Maple Street. "You're up early, buddy," Mike said, joining him on the porch step. Marcus nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mom and Dad. Do you think they'd be happy with what we've done to the house?" Mike felt his heart constrict. Wrapping an arm around Marcus's shoulders, he said softly, "I think they'd be overjoyed, Marcus. Not just with the house, but with you. With how brave and strong you've been. With how you've opened your heart to so many people." Marcus leaned into Mike's side, silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I miss them. Every day. But it doesn't hurt as much anymore. Is that okay?" Mike blinked back tears, pulling Marcus closer. "That's more than okay, buddy. That's healing. Your parents will always be a part of you, but it's okay to be happy, to move forward. That's what they would want for you." As the day progressed, Maple Street came alive with activity. Neighbors arrived bearing dishes of food, balloons, and warm wishes. The renovated house was filled with laughter and conversation, the sounds of life and community that it had been missing for so long. Mike watched as Marcus moved through the crowd, his initial shyness giving way to excitement as he showed off his new room to his friends from school. Lisa, too, seemed to be blossoming, engaged in animated conversation with neighbors who had become friends over the past months. As the afternoon wore on, Mike found himself standing in the backyard, taking a moment of quiet amidst the celebration. He was joined by Captain Rodriguez, who clapped him on the shoulder with a warm smile. "You've done good, Donovan," the captain said, his voice gruff but filled with pride. "Real good." Mike shook his head, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude. "It wasn't just me, sir. This whole community came together. You were the catalyst," Rodriguez interrupted. "You saw a need, and you didn't just talk about it. You took action. That's what being a good cop, a good member of the community, is all about." Before Mike could respond, he was interrupted by the sound of someone tapping on a glass. Turning, he saw Dr. Chun standing on the back porch, Marcus by her side. "If I could have everyone's attention for a moment," Dr. Chun called out, her voice carrying across the yard. "Marcus has something he'd like to say." A hush fell over the gathering as all eyes turned to Marcus. The boy looked nervous for a moment, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Mike. Drawing strength from Mike's encouraging nod, Marcus took a deep breath and began to speak. I want to thank everyone for being here today," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "For helping with the house, for being there for me and Aunt Lisa. I know my mom and dad would be really happy to see all of you here." He paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "I used to think that if I waited long enough, if I was good enough, my parents would come back. But I understand now that they can't. And that's okay, because they're still with me, in my heart and in my memories. And now, they're here too, in this house and in all of you." Mike felt tears streaming down his face, unashamed of the emotion overwhelming him. Looking around, he saw he wasn't alone. There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. Marcus continued, his voice steady now. So I want to make a promise. I promise to live the way my parents would have wanted me to be kind, to help others, to never forget how much love there is in this community. And I promise to always remember them, but to also keep moving forward. As Marcus finished speaking, there was a moment of profound silence. Then, as if on cue, the backyard erupted in applause. Lisa rushed forward to envelop Marcus in a hug, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. Mike felt a tug on his hand and looked down to see Jake standing beside him, eyes wide with emotion. "Dad," Jake said softly, "I think I understand now. Why helping Marcus and this house was so important to you." Mike knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his son. "Oh yeah? What do you think?" Jake's brow furrowed in concentration. "It's about family, right? Not just the family you're born with, but the family you choose. The people who stand by you no matter what." Mike felt a surge of pride and love, so strong it nearly took his breath away. "That's exactly right, buddy," he said, pulling Jake into a hug. "That's exactly right." As the party began to wind down, Mike found himself back on the front porch, this time joined by Marcus, Lisa, Jake, and Sarah. They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the sun began to set over Maple Street, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Marcus leaned against Mike's side, his voice soft but clear in the evening air. "Officer Mike, I think I'm ready now." Mike looked down at him, curious. "Ready for what, buddy?" Marcus smiled, a smile that held both sadness and hope. "Ready to say goodbye, to stop waiting and start living, just like Mom and Dad would want." Mike felt his heart swell with a mixture of pride and bittersweet joy. He pulled Marcus closer, dropping a kiss on top of his head. "I think that's very brave, Marcus. And I think your parents would be incredibly proud of you." As they sat there, this makeshift family brought together by tragedy and healing, Mike realized that this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, a new chapter for Marcus and Lisa, for Jake and Sarah, for himself, and for the entire community of Millbrook. The renovated house on Maple Street stood as a symbol of that new beginning. No longer a place of loss and waiting, but a home filled with love, memories, and the promise of a future bright with possibility. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Mike looked at the faces around him. Marcus, finding strength and healing. Lisa, rediscovering joy. Jake, understanding the true meaning of family. Sarah, forging a new kind of friendship. And he knew, with a certainty that filled his entire being, that this was where he was meant to be. In helping Marcus find his way back to life, Mike had found his own path forward, a path that led not to perfection or the absence of pain, but to a life rich with connection, purpose, and love. As stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Mike silently renewed his promise to Marcus, to Jake, to this community that had become his extended family. A promise to keep moving forward, to keep reaching out, to keep believing in the power of compassion and the strength of the human spirit. And as a gentle breeze carried the lingering scents of the party, the sweetness of cake, the earthiness of freshly mowed grass, the faint traces of paint from the renovated house, Mike closed his eyes and sent a quiet thank you to John and Ava Williams for the legacy they had left behind, a legacy that had brought healing and unity to an entire community. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the warmth of newfound family and the strength of a community united, Mike knew that this story, Marcus's story, his own story, the story of Millbrook, was far from over. It was in many ways just beginning, and what a beautiful beginning it was. What would you do if you were in Officer John's shoes, discovering the heartbreaking reason why a little boy like Marcus sat in front of that abandoned house every day? Would you have gone to the same lengths to help him find peace, or taken a different approach? If this story of compassion, healing, and the bond between two strangers touched you, please consider subscribing to my channel. I put so much care into sharing these powerful stories, and your support truly helps me continue creating them. Thank you for being part of this journey.